touch each other, please. They go right down deep, and they have collided. So both the BWT cars collide.
So it's an inside squabble between the two Williams. Look to me like Rosberg tapped the back of Webber. That is absolutely the last thing any Formula One team wants to see.
That's a Lacey and Heidfeld. I don't know what's happened, but it's the big poor Alain Prost, as if he hadn't got enough pressure on him.
Oh, we've lost a wheel. It's a racing engineering car that's ripped his left wheel off. Furious at his teammate. That will be a very fun team briefing.
Hello everyone and welcome to the GP Rejects podcast Teammate Collision. It is I, Lennart, and I'm joined by my co-host and GP Rejects most valuable player, Jeremy. Hi.
Hello there. Thank you, Lennart. Yes, great to be here for our end of year podcast. We got some awards, we got some talking, lots and lots of talking to do. Right now it's 6:30 in Finland, and we're thankfully not here to talk about the football because I couldn't care less, but it is total darkness outside and the nights seem unending here in Finland, much like our 2022 season.
Yeah, as you can see, we are our usual cheerful self, and indeed, as Jeremy said, we're going to talk about the 2022 season and hand out precious awards for a lot of drivers, because everyone likes an award, don't you? Think so?
Everyone likes an award, but not everyone will get an award, simply for the fact that not everyone was interesting enough to get one, to inspire me enough to write one for them.
Still, there's going to be a lot of awards handed out, so again, if you're a driver listening to us, which you probably aren't, you got a very good chance of getting to get one of those awards. Unfortunately, we don't have the financial means to actually give you physical awards, but you can always just write a little note with 2022 in the award here winner and post it on your wall. And if you do, please send a picture of it to our gprejects.com Twitter account, because that would make our egos big.
Yep. So who's our first award? Shall we go from top to bottom? Shall we go from bottom to top? Or should we just jump in a completely random order?
Well, I would simply do it in the order I wrote them down, and that is in
the best order.
In reverse championship order, starting with the bottom. Do you want to start, or do you want me to have
No,
first?
please, after you, Leonard.
Well, I'm actually going to go with the last place driver in the championship, and that is Nico Hülkenberg. He actually gets an award. So, hi Nico. And what he does get is the Nanomachine Son Award for a career that, despite the fact that it probably should, and we all thought it had, just won't die.
He has. I admire Nico Hülkenberg. Now, I may be a minority in this. I suppose I don't have a strong feeling as to whether he's been hired next year, or not. I'm happy for him, but I also admire his tenacity, because people have. This is the same community which loves the super subs of the old days, and Nico Hülkenberg is just the most uninteresting choice for a driver, but he has a very good agent, and he has made it his mission to get back into Formula One, no matter what the cost, for the years of his life that he will sit on the sidelines and drive whenever anyone gets COVID or deliberately boycotts the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix and pretends they have COVID. But the fact is that he has come back and he's got a drive for next year, and I admire him for that. He doesn't give a crap that it's Haas, and I don't give a crap that it's Haas either. Good on him.
Yeah. In the end, what I can fully agree with what you said. It's stubbornness. Again, the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance reference is, after all, for someone who, well, won't die. So, yeah, he's sticking around, and let's just say he's at least better than the driver he's replacing for next season. So, that's that.
We'll get to that. Okay, and who is penultimate in the championship?
That is Nick de Vries. And I actually also have an award for him.
Okay.
Which goes back to the point that you made, that you found Hülkenberg very inspiring, because I personally found de Vries inspiring, not for his personality or for his drive or anything, but just for the way he got to Formula One, and that is why he gets the Nonlinear Inspiration Award. What I mean by that is the infamous super license point system that famously kept Colton Herta out of a seat at AlphaTauri has many, myself obviously included, fearing that the non-traditional or the non-linear, non-F4, F3, F2 path to Formula 1 is dead. And while De Vries is a Formula 2 champion after all, it's not what got him into Formula 1. It's the effort he put into Formula E. So I'm just happy that there's still a way for drivers to get to Formula 1 that isn't just Formula 2.
Yeah, no, I agree. Alejandro Agag must be grinning even much more than Nick De Vries ever was back in Monza, just to see that there is some tiny semblance of legitimacy to Formula E in the modern age, despite what the FIA tries to shove in our faces with their super license point system. I am very happy again for De Vries. I think I don't need to say too much more because I think I said that in our previous podcast for Monza, but I am very happy to see that he got his chance, and from that he is coming back. And I think his one chance in Monza was perfect. It was just the right teaser for the Formula 1 audience. He's Dutch, so the Dutch fans will be happy. He's a breath of, I wasn't going to say a breath of fresh air, but it's I really like a journeyman. And Nick De Vries, if anything, is a journeyman. He's taken a long time to get to Formula 1, and I wish him all the best next year.
Yeah, good luck, De Vries. I would say you're going to need it given that you're entering Red Bull's structure, but that would be a bit mean. And we are totally not mean yet. No, we are always nice.
For the bottom two drivers in the championship, we've been surprisingly positive about them.
Yeah, and now we get to the last two of the full-time drivers, which are indeed the two Williams drivers, Nicolas Latifi and Alexander Albon. Do you have any awards for those two?
I actually do not, funnily enough. Nicolas Latifi is, well, I was always skeptical when he first came. I mean, I first saw him in Formula 2 in 2017, and Formula 2 and Formula 1 are very different series, but he has hardly been, outside of that Hungarian drive last year, who could forget, he has hardly been the most inspiring driver. His drive in Japan when he took 9th in the weirdly shortened race, which somehow was also full points, lent him 2 points, which was as many as Nick De Vries, I suppose. If you imagine that it was half points, he would still be behind De Vries in the championship. But Latifi, I really don't have a huge amount to say about him. He's done a lot of crashing. He's been very slow. I remember one of the races, I think it was Mexico, he was something like almost a minute behind the next driver on the grid, and he at times really looks like Mazepin. I think someone said quite aptly in the beginning of the season that now that Mazepin is gone, there is always someone to fill that void for slowest driver on the grid, and Mazepin's absence has really shone the light on Nicolas Latifi, and he's not coming back, but we'll always have Hungary.
And if not for the fast that was Spa, he would have beaten George Russell. Is that true?
I think it is true. Yes, it's never mind. From the joys of Hungary to the tragedy of Spa. It's going to make a good reject profile one day.
I would say so, and I'm looking forward to either writing or reading it. But then again, given my writing output.
Alex Albon, so if we go through his career, it's been very strange. He seems to have had a 6-7 year career in 3 years. He's had his time in the junior team in Toro Rosso, very quickly promoted to Red Bull. Didn't do as badly as Gasly did, and got fired at the end of 2020 because he just didn't show the goods, and had a year out and came back with Williams, and it was similar to Bottas getting the Alfa Romeo drive from Mercedes. It was a breath of fresh air to see Albon in a different environment than the one we're used to seeing him in. He did a couple of good drives. He obviously had the measure of Latifi. I don't think anyone would argue against that. But at the same time, that was it. The people who are saying that Albon is back, quote unquote, I don't really know where Back is. I don't know where his career is going to go, if he's just going to be a journeyman at Williams, or if he'll ever get even a midfield drive again. I don't know if he's just sort of on life support in his career. I don't know if this is the stepping stone he's going to take to get back into the competitive seats one day. But bit of a question mark over Alexander Albon for me for that reason.
Yeah, you basically summarized the reason I don't have any awards for them either. So, as you said, Latifi, he's just not good, but he's a classic pay driver in the GP Reject spirit, so we are very glad for his career. So, yeah, it's probably over, unless some major economic collapse hits one of the teams and they desperately need money, but I don't see that happening now that we're in the franchise era. And so, yeah, thanks for the memories, but your profile is waiting. And Alexander Albon, you said it perfectly. I could not agree more. He's there, and unfortunately that's all he is. Like, again, he's in Formula 1, which obviously if you want to be in Formula 1, I'm happy for you if you are in Formula 1, but it's not like he has shown something that has any reason to assume he will do something big in Formula 1. It's not like he will have a career of legend. He will not get back to a top team. I am pretty certain of that. There are just too many options for them driving around elsewhere. So, yeah. Happy for Alexander that he returned. Bit sad that he didn't continue in DTM, which obviously would have raised the star power of that series, but yeah.
Yep.
Welcome back.
If I may just conclude on Albon, he and Hulkenberg, for example, are, if you think of it in stark contrast to last year when we had Giovinazzi and Raikkonen, and as you say, Albon and Hulkenberg want to be in Formula 1. So does Kevin Magnussen. We'll get to him as well. Like, it's hard to dislike or sort of be bitter against drivers who are trying their best to be in Formula 1, and it's where they feel at home. And Daniel Ricciardo is another example, and that's why it's been heartbreaking to see him do so badly. But it's positive to see someone like Albon who is trying his best in the worst car on the grid. I don't know if he'll go anywhere from here, but can't fault him.
Yeah, then we are on to the fifth last driver in the standing, and that is Ganjo. Oh god, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Cut that. That is Alfa Romeo's Joe, who I have an award for, and that is the Codpiece Award for most convincing display of dignity by getting kicked in the testicles.
But please elaborate.
See, the thing is, Joe got completely destroyed by Bottas, his own teammate. He is like a million points behind. He was out-qualified, and more often than not outraced. But despite the fact that Bottas went to town on him, he looked more convincing than anyone in the 2020 rookie class did. 2021 rookie class did.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's been interesting. He's been one of the hardest people to really rate because he's I gave Alfa Romeo my first award of the evening, which is the Lost Cause Award, because it seems like no matter how much money or how good a car they have, they'll just throw it away. And Alfa Romeo, I predicted last year, no matter what situation happens, they'll throw away points. They'll throw them away with bad pit stops, with poor strategy, with reliability problems, everything. And Zhu was definitely, especially in the first half of the season when Alfa Romeo were actually good, he was the victim of most of those problems. Bottas we'll get into later, but Zhu had so many problems with it. He had many retirements, probably the most, if I'm not mistaken, mechanical retirements, at least in the first half. I wouldn't say he got completely destroyed. On paper, it certainly looks quite bad. Bottas certainly shone in the first half of the season, but as things got worse in terms of the car clearly not competing, so did Bottas. And there was a couple of races at the end. I'm pretty certain that the Austin race was a good example, whereby Zhu quite clearly outpaced him in the qualifying and outpaced him in the race. And he seems to be a perfectly competent driver. But but again, not in a very fast car.
Yeah.
And wasn't able to capitalize at the best moments, so a bit of a question mark over him still.
Yeah, in the end, the standings make it look worse than he was. The 14-8 qualifying record again is not too convincing, and let's be real here, Bottas isn't anywhere close to the best driver on the grid. So, but again, he looked much more convincing than Mazepin did, Tsunoda did, than Schumacher did, and we will get to those.
And Nicholas Latifi did. You said 2020 initially as a mistake, but
yeah.
Nicholas Latifi as well.
Obviously,
you can go back an extra year.
Okay, then on to the next driver for whom I actually also have an award. That is Yuki Tsunoda. And he is...
Okay, what's your award for him?
He is the placeholder of the year 2022. Because it is so...
Oh my goodness.
Bloody obvious that Red Bull would like to put someone else in his place. But they don't, because they don't have one right now. There were reports that Red Bull were disappointed with the effort shown or the results by their Formula 2 drivers, which is understandable, especially Liam Lawson really should have won the championship. If he wanted to be promoted to Formula 1, that is. And so it is pretty much clear that he's just there until Red Bull have a better option, which probably will be Ayumu Iwasa. That's the name. He apparently is one Red Bull, or Dr. Marco to be precise, liked very much, but they think he needs another year in Formula 2, which, well, let's just say nobody needs another year in Formula 2, but... but yeah. So yeah, basically Tsunoda did a brilliant job of just being there to fill the space until someone actually good comes along.
Yeah, Tsunoda has improved since last year, in the fact that his attitude has clearly improved a little bit. He's clearly gone to the therapy or whatever it was that he needed. The intra-team situation seems to be a lot calmer. He's no longer on his first day. He's on his second year and he's coming into his third year, whether or not he's deserved it. As you say, a placeholder. He's done very mediocrely. He has gone against Pierre Gasly in what I would consider to be a very poor year for Pierre Gasly and lost. So there's no real future for Tsunoda. Both he and Gasly, frankly, are just there to, like, Gasly is the yardstick, as we mentioned, I think, in the 2021 podcast. And Tsunoda is the current measurement, and he's not measuring up very well.
Yeah, simple as that. And with that, we go to another member of the 2021 rookie class, and that is Mick Schumacher, who finished one place ahead of him of Tsunoda in the championship. And I also have an award for him.
Okay.
The longer career than Nelson Piquet Jr. award for disappointing second-generation drivers.
Ooh, that is a good award. I was going to say the You Told Us So Memorial Award was going to be my award given to him, but yeah, he just wasn't all that. Just wasn't it, as you would say. He is now basically gone. I don't know who's going to hire him after this year. Schumacher, for anyone who's watched anyone who takes a cursory glance at Wikipedia can see that his first year is always rubbish. Then his second year starts a little bit better, and then somewhere it just clicks, and then he just gets into a groove, and he does really well. He won his Formula 3 Euro season that way, and he won his Formula 2 championship that way. And in Formula 1, he got a 6th place at the Österreich-Ring, or the Red Bull Ring, whatever it's called these days. And that was it. He never scored points again. At the moment, which everyone was like, yes, Mick Schumacher has finally made it. But that was it. That was his one with the racing gods, as they say. And his crash in Monaco was quite spectacular, and I'll remember him for his crashes. But he certainly hasn't done anywhere near enough to retain his place on the grid. And frankly, Hülkenberg, although he's not the most exciting choice on the grid, would probably get a sizable chunk of points this year, just as Kevin Magnussen did. But Schumacher, I mean, the moment where he qualified last when Magnussen was on that fantastic pole in Brazil was I don't want to say it was symbolic of everything that happened this year or anything like that. It's just what it was. He qualified last at the one moment when his teammate got pole, and he just never took advantage of any of the moments when Haas was actually good, except for that one time in Austria, and since then did nothing. So he's got a famous name, so people like him and the commentators will suck up to him, but otherwise, like, I don't foresee him ever coming back to Formula One, but I've been wrong before. Only probably in the last podcast, I'm sure I've been wrong about 70 times. But if I was to make a prediction now, Mick Schumacher is seen his last race in Formula One.
Yeah, according to the rumors, it seems like Mercedes are very much entertaining the notion of hiring him as a reserve driver, which Toto Wolff more or less said is because the family Schumacher has a very deep relationship with Mercedes, because again, Michael drove for the Formula One works team, Ralf Schumacher was a works driver for them in DTM, so yeah, nepotism gets him one more job in Formula One, but in the end, the reality is, as you said, he is just not it. Even though he actually outperformed Magnussen on Sunday, it was never when it mattered, and as you said, he wasted a lot of material. According to a report I read, the second seat at Haas actually was something that they were going to consider Giovinazzi, but he spoiled his chances by crashing at Austin in the free practice session he had at Austin. So if those reports are true, it explains Hülkenberg, because Hülkenberg is a rather reliable driver all in all, and of course it explains why Mick never stood a chance at retaining the seat, even if he had delivered. But yeah, when you cost your team that much money, you better be worth it, and Mick was not. Simple as.
I mean, they say the Haas lineup is uninspiring, but I mean, they picked Hülkenberg because the other two drivers crash more than he does. That's why they picked Hülkenberg. I mean, if that is inspiring, I don't know what is. All right, who's next?
Then next we got Lance Stroll, and if you have an award for him, please do.
I have the 2021 Daniel Ricciardo Memorial Award for Lance Stroll, meaning that he was rubbish, but not rubbish enough to be reject of the year. He had one or two moments of greatness which do not qualify him for being reject of the year, though he probably deserves it. Much like Ricciardo had last year with his inexplicable win at Monza, which just looks even stranger after his second year in McLaren. Lance Stroll, he finished with less than half of Vettel's points after driving in two more races than his teammate did. He did very little to show. It's just, we say the same thing about Lance Stroll every year, don't we? He did very little to convince us that he deserves a place in Formula One, especially after being in his seventh season at this point. And yeah, what's he done? What's he done this year, which has made him deserve another seat next year? Nothing. But he will be there next year, and we as Formula One fans have to live with that, but he also hasn't been so bad that we can give him reject of the year. He is just unfortunately part of the furniture. He's that armchair you inherited from your grandparents, which is just like brown, and it's still got that plastic covering, and it smells of nicotine, but it just
does the job.
It's there, and you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, in the end, if we want to force analogies to past Formula One drivers, he's pretty much the Andrea de Cesaris of the modern Formula One day, in the fact that he's there, he's good for an occasional flash of greatness, but he's also going to do something silly every now and then, and yeah, because he has money, he will be there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his occasional moments of greatness, but all I remember for him from this year was his crash at Austin with Fernando Alonso, and his multiple times where he forgot that he has mirrors, namely at Melbourne, and I think also, if I remember correctly, at Sao Paulo as well. That was on his teammate as well. That was on Vettel. So a pretty crap year for Lance Stroll in a series of pretty crap years in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, but he also had a couple of races where he just was outright faster than Sebastian Vettel, who all in all didn't have a bad year at all. There was also the couple of times where he scored good points. So I wouldn't say he had a good year, but again, as you said, it's also not so offensively bad as to be in contention for reject of the year. So farting noise.
Yeah, that's about all we got on Lance Stroll. So next up is Pierre Gasly. What I have an award for him, but would you like to give your award first?
I don't actually have a particularly worthwhile one, so no.
Okay, so whereas Mick Schumacher was the Lennart Gortorf Memorial I Told You So award, for me, Pierre Gasly is the Jeremy Scott Memorial I Told You So award. I told you so. I said, when everyone else was saying last year that Pierre Gasly was, he should be in that Red Bull seat. And I said, yeah, sure. But yeah, he, like every driver in a midfield car who claims that he should be in the top seat and not this other driver, it lasts for a little while, but it never lasts forever, does it? And Pierre Gasly this year has been just a shadow of last year. He hasn't had any of the big performances, at least to my recollection this year, that he did last year. His form, admittedly, the AlphaTauri has maybe not been as strong as last year, but also Gasly's performances haven't been there. I never saw him really take advantage of the situations that he was being put into, and while he had the measure of Tsunoda, that's not exactly a high bar to clear. I was not necessarily disappointed by Gasly, but more satisfied for my own ego that I was correct. Maybe you have a less narcissistic description of Pierre Gasly from 2022.
Well, not necessarily, but there is one point I think kind of, well, I don't want to say excuses his middling performance, but more in the sense of explains it with the notion that we kind of need to see what it does next year before lack of a better word, before I grant you the 100% I told you so. Right now we're just talking about 95%. That is it. And Gasly was pretty vocal about that, surprisingly, that he was very disappointed with not earning a re-promotion to Red Bull, so to speak, for 2022 on account of his strong 2021 season, to the point where he publicly asked or told that he had no idea what he needed to do to get that seat back. And I can imagine that very much negatively affected his performance, made him mentally check out, like, okay, whatever I'm going to achieve in my career, I'm not going to achieve it with Red Bull after all. So I'm reserving the last 1% of I told you so for if he also isn't impressive at Alpine, then yeah.
Yeah, the Alpine situation is interesting because from what you describe of Pierre Gasly, I think it's quite accurate. But I also think that from that, Gasly is quite entitled. He's like, "What about me? Why aren't I in that seat?" And your team boss is the one who pays your wages and dictates how good you are, and they don't think he's good enough because they tried him and he wasn't good enough. So like he's going to Ocon, and I don't know if they'll get along or not. I wish him all the best. Maybe it will be good for him to get out of the Red Bull stable. But I don't know exactly what the history of him and Ocon is. But I've heard that they don't get along. And I wonder if it's not going to just be fireworks from day one. And as you say, next year perhaps is the year where we can really know if Pierre Gasly is, as you keep saying, it.
Yeah. So of course Ocon, I'm going to reach a bit because I'm going to talk about it more when the time comes. But it's going to be interesting to see whether that actually turns out to be fireworks, because Ocon has a history of being, well, combative with teammates. Let's put it this way. But yeah, it's going to be curious to see whether that actually affects him, because this year was slightly different. But again, we'll get to that, so I don't want to take too much away. So yeah, we're on to Kevin Magnussen, and Kevin Magnussen gets the 2022 Motorsports War Profiteer of the Year award.
Brilliant. Yeah, I gave him a much more innocuous and sort of general award, which was just the Comeback of the Year award, or the Surprise of the Year award. The sad news of this year's Ukraine conflict has dominated the news, and in February, end of February, beginning of March, Kevin Magnussen got a call up from Gunter Steiner, presumably, and got a seat for this year at the Haas team, which had scored 0 points last year, came 5th in the first race, which is one of the performances of the season. I was going to say it might be the performance of the season, aside from his own performance at Sao Paulo, getting pole position. Kevin Magnussen has been, I was going to say great, but I will hold myself back from saying that. He has been good. And that's good enough for Haas because they've not had very many good drivers in a while. Good for him. He wants to be in Formula One. He proves himself again and again that he is good enough for Formula One. Let's just hope that the next couple of years are at least fun for him, because he seems to have brokered himself a year or two extra at Haas with that contract following Mazepin's dismissal. So let's see if it all goes south next year, or if it's just a couple of years of him driving around enjoying himself, because that seems to be his purpose in Formula One, much like Hulkenberg. So let's see next year. Again, can't exactly be angry at that.
Yeah, the thing is, why I gave him this rather cynical award is because, for all intents and purposes, his Formula One career seemed done. Because what was he doing in 2021? He was driving sports cars, and when you're driving sports cars after Formula One, it is a very emphatic statement that, yeah, you're probably not going to get back to Formula One unless, of course, a bloody war starts. So, yeah, as I said, he did well. Especially in qualifying, he completely curb-stomped. On Sundays, it was actually more even than the championship standings make it look, which is raising questions about his future performance. But honestly, that's really nitpicking, since he was the one who scored the majority of points when the car was good enough to score points in the usual Haas way. That obviously stopped being a fact in the later part of the season. So yeah, again, happy for him to come back, and obviously to earn himself a multi-year contract after all. So yeah, we'll see next year what Haas can do, what he can do, whether he beats Hülkenberg or Hülkenberg beats him. Yeah. Then on to the next driver, which is famous retiree Sebastian Vettel. And do you have an award for him?
No, just famous retiree. It sounds like he's crashed a lot. But
I actually have an award for him, but that one is not specific to his season as in what he did during the season, but it's more a general award about his role in the sport, and with that he gets the Most Dignified Retirement of 2022 award. What I mean by that,
damn, that's very well put. Yeah.
What I mean by that is, if you look not just at Formula One or motorsport, even at the sports world in general, it is, because careers are nowadays longer because of medical advancement, so much less common that a driver like Vettel isn't at the absolute height of his abilities. Like, he has obviously taken a step back from his 2017, 2018 performance, but it is certainly not so fast as we are not at the point where we could say he's actually leaving because he just doesn't have it anymore. And that is something that is very rare. If you look at what LeBron James is doing in the NBA with the LA Lakers, what you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, who recently has been fired by Manchester United, despite all the money he's owed. And actually seeing where things are heading, seeing that you don't actually achieve in the sport what you want anymore, and then just leaving is nowadays actually pretty rare, especially when you look at recent statement by Sir Lewis Hamilton, who said he wants to drive until he's 40, at least. And you look at Fernando Alonso being okay with his perpetual midfield life, then
a 2-year contract for the next 2 years.
And then Vettel simply saying, okay, no, I'm not near the top anymore. Aston Martin won't get there in a time frame that I consider acceptable, so I'm leaving. That is something, again, even if you think his performance has dropped off, just the choice to walk away while you still have something left to give, the idea of leaving them wanting more, that is something he did. And that is something that nowadays is rare, and that is something I respect, which gave him this I'm sure, very prestigious award.
He'll be back within 3 years.
Interestingly, I actually don't think so, unless somehow a top seat opens up. Because that is something Vettel has been surprisingly vocal about, that he isn't there just to make up the numbers. And so, yeah, unless you see, I don't know, Red Bull needing a better number 2, or one that doesn't necessarily say Max is who he is. I actually don't think we will see Vettel back in Formula 1. Other motorsport series, sure, but Formula 1, I wouldn't say so. At least not if the driver market develops in a way we can foresee.
Yeah, no. He's always been very Formula 1 centric. He's a bit of a one series guy in that sense, and there's nothing wrong with that. Hulkenberg and things are the same. F1 is a career, and his F1 career is over, so I don't particularly see him outside of the occasional fun race in some other series around around the world. I don't particularly see him coming back, but part of me has this cynical idea that he's coming back.
I do not blame you.
Yeah.
I do not blame you.
You defended him in your speech just there, and I would say genuinely, like, he doesn't need defending. He can go out with his head held high. He's had an okay season. He's had some low moments, he's had some high moments, and his high moments could have been higher if not for a little bit of bad luck. But he's gone out, as you say, if maybe not with his head held very highly, he's gone out decently, which is more than most multi-world champions and these drivers in their mid-30s, and as you say, like people like Ronaldo don't necessarily do that. So yeah, good on him. He's going to go probably retire, hang out with his family for a while, and then come back and do soapbox driving every now and then. But yeah, maybe he'll even turn up at Goodwood. I don't have anything more to say about Sebastian Vettel. I think now is not the time.
Yeah, we had
because I think I've said all I can about him.
Plus, obviously, we had the rejectful moments of Sebastian Vettel's career podcast. So if you want to listen to that after this podcast, obviously not before it has ended, then obviously we have it on our YouTube channel. So please enjoy that episode. We desperately need the views.
Okay. All right, who is next?
Then we get to Daniel Ricciardo. And I actually don't have an award for that. At least not a... Yeah, no, I don't have an award for that.
I have an award. It's he is the Kimi Räikkönen mid-2013 to 2021 Memorial Retire Old Man Award. It looks like Daniel Ricciardo is retiring at the end of this year, not due to his own desire, but due to his performances. What a sad way to end a career. Absolute rubbish. Yeah,
in the end, Red Bull have apparently confirmed him as a third driver, but yeah, I don't think that will amount to much, especially since, again, there are so many Red Bull kids. And if not even Tsunoda is nothing more than a placeholder, then yeah, Ricciardo will do marketing and very little else. And the analogy to Kimi Räikkönen is very fitting in one specific aspect. And we could see he was getting past it. Everyone could see it getting past it. The teams could see him getting past it. But, and if you're being brutally honest, or more precisely, if he is brutally honest with himself, he also saw himself getting past it. But because he is popular, because of that disgusting shoey, among other things, people don't want to admit it. And while it is true that the McLaren in many ways didn't fit his driving style, and of course he had a very good teammate, we'll get to that, they just made excuses for him. But yeah, it's a bit tragic that someone at the quote-unquote mere age nowadays at sport of 33 is no longer the guy he used to be, but it happens. And He has certainly left us with a lot of good memories. Just to name one, the 2018 Monaco Grand Prix, obviously, his masterpiece there. And
of course.
so, yeah, I would say enjoy your retirement, but if you don't want it to be a retirement, so... Sorry, man, but...
I will... I will save any further comment about Ricciardo for later. Hint, hint.
And on to the next driver, which is Valtteri Bottas.
Valtteri Bottas. Wow. What can we say about him other than the same thing I said about Zhou? The lost cause. Bottas was rejuvenated when he came out of Mercedes, came to Alfa Romeo. Did fine in the early races. He still threw away some results. So although I mentioned Alfa Romeo as all with the lost cause, that was referring to the drivers a little bit. Miami is a good example of when he was in, I think, the top 4, ahead of both Mercedes, and he slipped off, missed the corner, let them all past. It's like, great. I think he did the same thing at Imola. He could have held up George Russell, but he didn't. As far as I'm aware, he made a mistake. He beached himself into the gravel trap at Austin. He made mistakes. He wasn't brilliant this season, but he made up the points when the car could, but he didn't make up all the points he could have. But otherwise, not looking at him in the standings, I don't think he would have been very much higher up in the numbers had he got more points. But points mean prizes, as they say, and Alfa Romeo certainly need the points, although fat lot of good it's doing them in terms of their management or their reliability.
In the end, to me, Bottas was pretty much a perfect reflection of his car's competitiveness. Like, he took it as far as it could go. He didn't have that 100%, 110% level some drivers do, but he took it as far as it would go throughout all the entire season, and you could clearly scale the decline of Alfa Romeo Racing along with the decline of Bottas' results. So, yeah, in many ways, he was a perfect reflection of their year. So it's going to be interesting to see whether this will change next year, whether he will start slowly declining, because again, he will have been in Formula 1 10 years, just like Ricciardo was when he started to get slower. So yeah, next year's going to be interesting at Alfa Romeo Racing, even if the actual promise of performance isn't that brilliant, and obviously they are going to be looking into the future to the Audi entry. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see him and Joe duel it out, see whether Bottas is going to start declining or whether Joe is going to take that next step, or whether things will just continue as they are.
Okay, so in 9th place in the championship is someone I would love to talk a lot about. It's Fernando Alonso, who since about 2012 I have been a big fan of, and any other driver in his position I would be probably complaining about retire old man and stuff, but he is somehow just putting in the races. He is still proving himself as a damn good driver at his advanced age at this point, and good on him. He had the measure of Ocon, perhaps a little bit worse luck at the beginning of the year. People were saying, oh, he's past it after a couple of races and a couple of crashes. And then he had, I think, as far as I'm aware, outside the front runners, the longest run of points of any driver, as I say, outside the front runners, who never have reliability problems. But he did fantastically. One of the drives of the season, in my opinion, was Alonso in terms of overall season performance. And I wouldn't think I would say that in the year 2022.
I don't think anyone did. Yeah, it's 21st year in Formula 1. Is actually this was the 21st year, and the 22nd is coming up. That's the order. So yeah, as you said, he's still good. He's now going to see whether Aston Martin can actually take a step. I personally have my doubts, and especially since I mentioned it in the Vettel section, in a way, I don't want to judge him for it, because it's actually objectively not wrong, but it feels like Alonso is nowadays just happy to be here, and in a way for former world champion, that there's nothing objectively wrong with it, but it's something that always feels at odd with how I see the sport or sports in general, where you should have ambitions towards the top. And I genuinely am not sure whether Alonso has that anymore, whether he actually thinks himself, oh, yeah, I'm going to get that third world title, or I'm going to challenge for it at least.
I'm kind of glad he doesn't feel like that at his age now, but I get what you mean. I think Alonso's problem has always been throughout his career thinking, yes, I'm going to win a championship. Great idea, Alonso. And where are you going to win it? Ferrari. It's like, okay. No, maybe you should rethink that. Okay, I'm going to win a world championship. Where are you going to win it with? McLaren Honda in 2015. Maybe rethink that again. Yeah.
Yeah, I
He's
guess.
wasted his... Pardon, I was going to say, he's wasted his best years at teams which just weren't there to win the championship at the time, and you can argue either way about 2012, but since at least 2014 he's slowly but surely come through the various levels of grief to come to the acceptance stage that he's not going to win a world championship again, and I'm happy to see him in Formula One. It's he's not embarrassing himself, which is the
Agreed.
important thing.
That's 100% true. Of course, knowing how my luck with these things work, he's going to win a championship at Aston Martin now.
He's either going to be pointless next season or win the championship. Okay, who's next?
Yeah, that's actually Fernando Alonso's teammate, Esteban Ocon, who, for that fact alone, pretty much gets an award, and that is the Silent Assassin Award, because I had absolutely no clue before looking at the standings that he was so far up ahead. The Alpine was the best of the rest car in a way, but still, he just came in, did his job, which is why I mentioned that in the Pierre Gasly section, because it was so unlike many of his past seasons, where he did clash with Perez, where he did have his moments, but here was just there, did his job extremely well, because, as you said, beating Fernando Alonso isn't an easy task by any means. So, yeah. He's the silent assassin, and I'm looking forward to see whether he can just as stealthily sneak up the standings in 2023.
I gave Ocon the not particularly convincing award. I'm going to take a different view to you. I don't think that he... I said this before in the past, but I don't see why Alpine push him as their star multi-year contract driver. He is very consistent. He has that in common with Perez, and when they were teammates, they were a team of massive consistency. They were able to finish like 6th and 7th in every race, basically, in 2018, I remember. But never set the world on fire, and he never convincingly had the measure of Alonso. I would say they were about equal all year, and we were talking about whether Alonso should be content with fighting in the midfield. Should Alpine be content with their star driver being as good as a 41-year-old Fernando Alonso? I'm not particularly convinced about Esteban Ocon. Beating Alonso in his early 40s is not a particularly high bar to achieve, although you could debate that. You could debate how good Alonso is these days, because he is good. But I just don't think it really looks very good for Ocon. But maybe that's something which just requires more context, and the longer Ocon's career goes on for, the more we can really judge him. Because I find his performance quite hard to judge, because he's sitting in 8th in the championship, but no one knows he exists. Someone said on our Discord community a few weeks back, is anybody an Ocon fan? I'm not sure. But I think it raises, in a weird way, an interesting point of is it good enough for Ocon to be just there when he is on a 3-year contract with Alpine? I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I guess in a way it also ties into the I don't want to say philosophical, but in the conceptual nature of the Alpine works effort, because, and that is just my subjective opinion about the team, since Renault returned in 2016, it sort of had the underlying current they are just happy to be, in a way, just like Fernando Alonso in these
perfect match,
in the way that it just subjectively feels like they aren't actually looking to be like the old Renault teams, championship winners or contenders at least. But this is just my subjective view. Mario on the forums pointed out that they are indeed investing heavily into their team, so this might just be a wrong assessment. And for a team that, if I'm right, is just happy to be here, would just be okay with a driver who silently gets the job done, like Ocon did this year, even if, again, as you feel, he wasn't particularly impressive about it. So, as you say, it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes from here, and where Alpine go from here, when they make the big leap, whether Ocon makes them with them or just becomes yet another driver who couldn't hack it at the top. One way or another, we'll see.
Who's next?
Lando Norris. Do you have an award for Lando?
I have no award for Lando, but I don't think he needs our awards. I think he's done pretty damn well on his own. I don't really have anything funny or witty to say about Lando Norris. You said last year during the summertime that he might be the best driver in the world, and he's certainly the best driver at McLaren. But yeah, interesting season for him. Crap teammate, garbage teammate, in fact. He got the only podium of any driver outside the top six. We had a situation much similar to 4 years ago of Formula 1.5. People like to use it quite disparagingly, and sometimes it's stronger, or sometimes the argument is stronger and than other years. This year was a strong year for that argument, that the top six were basically in a league of their own. And Lando Norris was the best of the rest. And that's all he can be right now. So a damn good 9 out of 10 performance. Not got much more to say than that, other than please McLaren, give him a car which is actually competitive next year.
Yeah, I actually do have an award for him, but it is a very, let's say, classic one. He's my driver of the year. The thing is, I don't think it's a 9 out of 10 season yet. For me, it's a clear-cut 10 out of 10. Like, Ricciardo was bad. Don't get me wrong. We talked a lot about him, but I do not think he was 85 points worse bad. Like, if Norris had scored let it be 80 points, then I would have said, okay, yeah, the difference is solely Ricciardo is not good anymore. But Norris, as you said, I won't bring out the best driver in the world card this time, because there are a number of other candidates around the globe that have shown a lot of in 2022. But in Formula 1, he's definitely my driver of the year. He performed the best, and there's a reason he's the only driver outside of the aforementioned top six to have more than 100 points. McLaren would have been very much worse off without him. There wouldn't even have been a chance of challenging Alpine for that championship position if Norris wasn't there. So, yeah, as you said, let me rephrase that. I am going to fully and emphatically agree with your pleading. McLaren, you have possibly a generational talent in your midst. Get him a goddamn championship. Come on.
Wow, my ears.
Sorry about that.
Thank you for that impassioned speech. Yeah, I mean, Norris was actually ahead of Hamilton for many of the early races of the year, which was wonderful. Which is maybe a good segue into Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an award for him, so that segue went nowhere. Sorry.
I have for Lewis Hamilton the Collective Shrug Award. He is a very good driver. He is a 7-time world champion. Yada 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 yada. Complained a lot this year about how this is the worst car he's ever driven. A car which is easily the third best car, if not the second best car on the grid for most of the year. Didn't beat his teammate, George Russell, who, admittedly this is a new formula and things sometimes switch around that way, but he had some good moments. He had some very good podiums, especially during the mid-season. But he also had races like in Saudi Arabia and at Imola at the beginning of the year where he was absolutely rubbish. He was absolutely nowhere. So he's had more... So in a classic Hamilton season, he would have like 1 or 2 dud races. And this year, he's had about 4 or 5. And maybe it's just age creeping in. maybe it's just motivation seeping out when he's getting older and he's won his championships, and this year he was never going to win the championship, basically. Most of his podiums, much like Mercedes, were actually inherited from Ferrari shenanigans. But he did perfectly fine, but not good enough to beat his teammate, which is interesting at how much he's kind of gotten away with that. But collective shrug from me. He didn't get pole, he didn't win. These are sort of more symbolic things than anything else. But at the same time, in a car which wasn't the best, he didn't win, and he didn't get any poles, and he didn't beat his teammate.
Yeah, in the end, obviously, as I said, it's a new formula, so I'm going to fully reserve my judgment until next season. But in a way, especially the first half of the season, was pretty much Lewis Hamilton deciding, okay, I'm going to prove my haters completely right. Because he, again, especially in the first half, or more precisely the first third of the year, it was pretty much just, okay, I'm having some sort of adversity here, I'm going to fold like a poker player with a 2 and a queen. So, yeah, it's not a bad season by any means, but also, yeah, 7-time world champion, yada yada. Standards are higher. And that's all.
Yeah. There's so much we can say, but it's almost like it's a bit ad nauseum. We all know how good and how successful Lewis Hamilton is, so why wasn't he ahead of his teammate? Why didn't he win any races in spite of the many opportunities that he got? Because really Mercedes shouldn't have had as many opportunities as they did. But yep, collective shrug from me.
Good, then we are into the top 5 of the standings, and we're going to begin with Carlos Sainz Jr., who gets an award from me, and that award is the Gerhard Berger / David Coulthard not quite number 2 teammate award of the year, which, yeah, it's very unwieldy and also not probably something you want to hang on the wall. The thing is, with Carlos Sainz, yeah, he was pretty much just the... No, he was at Ferrari. He had the second best car on the grid for most of the year, and at some points even the best. In the first part of the season, he wasn't on Leclerc's pace, but he also wasn't quite in the Bottas level of pace where he's just not there. He did have a number of clumsy incidents in the earlier part of the season, but those got better as he got more used to the Ferrari. More used to the 2022 Ferrari. Obviously, by that, it was pretty much too late to mount any kind of serious challenge. So, yeah, he's not quite number 2, but also not good enough to actually threaten Leclerc, which, again, fits the Berger mold, fits the Coulthard mold. So, yeah, in a way, it is very similar to the shrug for Hamilton, but with a more historic flavor.
Yeah, I had to think about who I would compare him to for quite a while, and I couldn't think of it. So I was going to give him jokingly the 2022 Carlos Sainz Jr. Memorial Award because I think he set a new standard for a new standard for teammates to brilliant drivers. I think Sainz had some bad luck this year, like when he got punted out by Russell at least twice from memory, and he had some times when he threw it away. He had some times when Ferrari threw it away, and he had many times when he was actually faster than Leclerc. Not once, not twice, but many times. Much like last year, he was faster than Leclerc many times. He can be very fast, and I reckon, maybe this is a controversial statement, but I reckon he could be a world champion one day. But he finished the season more than 2 wins behind Leclerc, and I don't think that's representative of his actual talent. Whereas this year it seemed just due to circumstances that Ferrari were never going to win in retrospect. When they come up in a season maybe next year where they can win, Sainz has to. It's been an interesting middle season for many drivers this year, as we've seemed to have concluded from this big long list. Many drivers we can't really judge until we have another year and see just how good Sainz, for example, in this case is. I think he's had the worst season of any of the top 6. I don't think he deserves to be as low as 5th. I think he has been strong on occasion, but he also has thrown away more than enough races this year. And next year he needs to have a flawless season. And if he does, he could win a championship.
Yeah, fully agreed. And obviously, we want him to do well. We do, right?
Yep, we do.
Yeah. No. But yeah, he has talent. That is why I said, actually, I don't think the Gerhard Berger comparison was quite apt, given as he always was actively a step behind the top drivers in Formula One. But the David Coulthard comparison, I feel, is rather apt, because again, Coulthard had his moments, Coulthard had his near championship challenges that fell apart for one reason or another. So, yeah, as you said, he can be a world champion if dice fall right, so good luck to him, I'd say.
If I might conclude on signs with a paraphrasing of a funny joke I once saw on the internet, which is picture of Carlos Sainz Jr. going over the line at Silverstone. And the caption would read, Carlos Sainz Jr. unknowingly wins his last Grand Prix in Formula One.
Ooh.
So, on to George Russell. Now, George Russell, I do have an award for. The 2012 Romain Grosjean Memorial Award. That is a driver whom everyone, when I say everyone, I mean David Croft and Martin Brundle, seem to really, really like, and refuse to really give him the criticism he's probably deserved for this year. He's had a brilliant season, don't get me wrong. He's jumped into a top flight car, and well, he certainly had the measure of Hamilton all year. Not just at the beginning when Hamilton had his bad patches, but for most of the year. Hamilton had a really good middle point, but I would say the beginning and the end were George Russell's time. However, I can only give him an 8 out of 10, and I feel like I need to be strict to almost counteract the wreaths of pleasure that have been bestowed. Counteract the honors that have been bestowed upon him by the media and the pundits and everything for how wonderful, gorgeous George Russell has been. But he's also had his share of crashes and bashes, especially on the beginnings of races, taken no responsibility for any of them. And it's shown a pretty grumpy side of him, which I wasn't expecting. I did say last year when he was at Williams that he really needs to, if he wants to win a championship, iron out his mistakes, because he did make lots of mistakes at Williams. The occasional pit stop error, the occasional going off the track, and in this case, this year, it's now been punting people off on the first lap, and he won't win a championship if he keeps doing that. Or he might, but he won't win a championship easily if he keeps doing that. And he needs to step up his game. And I worry that beating Lewis Hamilton may have just made his ego grow twice the size that it already was, and that's not a good thing for him.
Yeah. I actually have a very specific award about something that happened to him, and for that, George Russell gets the 2022 Most Overshadowed Debut Win in Motorsport Award. Because, let's be honest here, no, he wasn't the story after winning the Brazilian Grand Prix, which is incidentally a shame, because the driver's first win should always be the biggest story of a weekend. I'm going to be blunt at it. Like, it would take, in my opinion, it should take something really big to overshadow a first win, like another driver winning the world championship or whatever, something along those lines. But
yeah, like Mika Häkkinen winning in Jerez and the Schumacher Villeneuve incident. Yeah, that I can understand.
Exactly, something like that. But not one guy refusing to let his teammates through for was it P6?
P6, indeed.
P nowhere by championship level standards, let's put it that way. So, yeah, I kind of feel sorry for him on that. But, as you pointed out, he didn't do himself any favors in terms of feeling more sorry for that. Especially in the first half of the year, something that really, in a way, rubbed me the wrong way was him talking about how he expected to be a race winner already. I think that interview was before the French Grand Prix, but don't be too precise about that. Which, yeah, is in a way a very entitled attitude. Then again, his teammate isn't very familiar with that either, and it won him 7 championships, so I am not too concerned about this affecting his long-term performance outlook when the car is right, because again, he has shown the talent. I am curious to see whether he can beat Hamilton next year, because if he does, then it's either going to say something really good about him or something really bad about Lewis. So, yeah. But you say his attitude could do with some improvement in some ways. I certainly don't disagree with that. And I'm happy he won his first race. I'm sad it got overshadowed, and he had a good season all in all, especially in the first half of the year where he just, especially the prime example of that is the Imola race where, the team apologizes for Hamilton for giving him the worst car ever, and I'm like, you guys are aware George Russell nearly took that car to the podium, or did he take it on the podium? Let's just say this season may not have done his ego any good, but again, if I'm coming in and beating Hamilton, I will also have a big ego, so who am I to judge?
Yeah, that's a good point. And 8 out of 10 season, I maybe 8.5. But for me, the attitude thing is important to me because I'm watching it as an audience member. I am also watching it for the sports side of things, and I like good winners. Which we'll get to. I guess we can just go straight on to Sergio Perez in that case and get into that conversation.
Yeah, Sergio Perez. What to say about the man? I don't have an award for him. Do you have one?
I do not have an award, but I am very pleasantly surprised at how well he did this year. The Red Bull car was better, I would say, in terms of its competitors. In terms of the gap between itself and its competitors, Red Bull was a lot stronger, and Sergio Perez actually delivered very, very well. He had many good races, not just a couple. He had very many good races, and he had very few bad ones. I think Perez's problem last year was he had a couple of periods where he would have 3 or 4 races where he was just not on the ball, and he had 1 or 2. I mean, so does everyone. Even Max Verstappen had a bad day or 2 this year, in spite of his 15 wins. And Perez basically had as many bad days as Verstappen did. His high days weren't as good as Verstappen's, but he got 2 wins. It could have been 3 or 4 had circumstances gone different, but he can hardly be dissatisfied with his season. 3rd place and almost 2nd. He did very well this year.
That is a surprising viewpoint because I don't actually... I won't go so far as to say he had a bad season, but he had a very unimpressive one, even by number 2 standards. The thing is, but I can understand why you would look at it that way, because his season was pretty much an inverted bell curve, so to speak. Like, he was pretty good at the start, had this win in Monaco, was generally competitive with Max, but then the middle of the season, that was just, Jesus Christ, why isn't Pierre Gasly in that seat? Or something along those lines, but then, of course, towards the end of the season, he started to pick it back up, and so I understand where you're coming from in the sense that I understand why someone thinks Sergio may have had a good season, but I just don't see it. Admittedly, I also don't believe the Red Bull was as dominant as the champion made it look. We'll get to that. But yeah, like, he wasn't outright awful, but let's just say, as far as number 2 driver season is concerned, there are a couple of better ones in, let's say modern Formula 1 history. So I wasn't particularly impressed, not really offended either after he started picking it back up again towards the end of the year, but yeah.
Out of interest, who would you say has had the worst season of the top 6?
If I'm being blunt, Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton. Okay. Would you say that Perez had a better or a worse season than Carlos Sainz?
Oh, that's actually a tough one, but that's a difficult one. This question pretty much depends on whether you judge it on outright performance versus let me rephrase that. Whether you judge it on speed versus the results. If you say speed, then I would say Perez had the worst season because, yeah, he, especially in the middle of the year, he was just not there. But compared to Sainz, he just didn't make anywhere near as many mistakes and didn't cost himself or Red Bull as many points as Sainz did Ferrari, and in turn Ferrari did Sainz. But all in all, I'd say I am more inclined to say Sainz had the better season, but by a very slim margin.
Okay. That sounds like a draw to me, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. That is something I work with. Like, we were being honest, this margin is so small. We could call it a draw. Let's call it a draw.
Draws are an option. Okay. So we have 2 drivers to go. Charles Leclerc.
I don't have I don't have an award for him, but I do have a warning, or not a warning, a reminder. Alan Prost, Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso. What do all these people have in common?
They're overrated.
I am just going to disagree with that and not go into it further.
I was hoping you would take that bait. Go on.
Sorry, not this time.
What do they have in common, Leonard?
They drove for Ferrari. They didn't win with Ferrari. And Charles, you're probably heading in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like it's going upwards, does it? Yeah, Ferrari this year were classic Ferrari. Leclerc he didn't put in a championship-worthy season because he made his own mistakes. France being the famous one, which is why I'm giving him the 2018 Sebastian Vettel Memorial Award, which is a good season, but not a championship-level season. In my opinion, this is me giving the award because I know Lennart's on the other side of his microphone going,
It's actually a very good description of the noise because I can't fully disagree, but
I could just hear you seething on the other side of your microphone. Like 2018 Sebastian Vettel, Charles Leclerc had very good races, but it just wasn't enough for a championship run, and he also had a moment whereby, I mean, he had this series of Ferrari nonsense, which, yeah, I don't think we need to say anything about that. Maybe people in the future may want to know more, but just look at the results of Ferrari in that year. Maybe they don't speak the whole truth, but Ferrari had a shocker of a championship run this year, even by their standards. But the French Grand Prix where Charles Leclerc dumped it in the wall while leading was, that's unforgivable. That is the kind of thing which people remember for years to come. And if Leclerc never wins with Ferrari, that will be his 2018 Hockenheim.
yeah, and in a way that is the thing. That is, for example, why you could hear me seizing. Not the thing is, obviously, these mistakes mustn't happen. But the fact that you need to be absolutely flawlessly perfect 10 out of 10 driving to have a chance to win a championship. Despite the Ferrari, because again, I said it before and I will now actually address it, I do not think the Ferrari was that much behind the Red Bull. Not to the point that they should have rolled away with these championships the way they did. And the problem is...
I agree with that.
And the problem is, when you have to be absolutely flawless and you probably still lose because of the team you're working with, then it always has this undercurrent of, what are we asking of these people? What do we actually want from them? Do we want them to be better than perfect? And that is why I'm going to, as I said, fully agree with you that Charles had mistakes that shouldn't have. That is, again, nobody is discussing that.
Everyone did this year.
Yeah.
No one had a flawless season.
Indeed.
Except maybe Norris.
Yeah. And that is the notion with the 2018 comparison, with the Vettel comparison. That is the problem, why it's always so hard for me to truly be negative about the drives of Vettel that year, the drives of Leclerc this year, and with all the mistakes he makes. What is he supposed to do to counteract his...
Overrated.
And that is
I'll bring you back to my previous point, Leonard.
Yeah.
Rubbish. Get better drivers, Ferrari.
Yeah. That is why didn't have a great season, but even if he had a great season, it wouldn't have mattered. And that is where Ferrari come into play, and that is why I just have nothing more to him than this warning that if Binotto is on the hot seat, Charles, use some sort of influence to get someone who isn't Ferrari in there if you have any chance of doing that. Because not getting your people in is it was ruined Alonso's time at Ferrari. It is what ruins Vettel's time at Ferrari. It is what ruins Prost's time at Ferrari, and Niki Lauda got away with it, not getting his new people in, partly because Di Montezemolo just started when he started, and partly because Lauda knew, okay, I'm winning championships in spite of Ferrari, so he could get away with it, and Michael just brought all his guys from Benetton over. But yeah, just get the Ferrari out of Ferrari if you want to win a championship, Charles. Do not let the hype fool you. You win races because of Ferrari, but you win championships in spite of them.
Oof. I have nothing more to add. Shall we go to Max Verstappen?
Indeed, the Formula One world champion. And he gets an award that many will feel is mean-spirited. And in a way, it sounds more like I'm not giving him his credit, but I will award him the 2001 Michael Schumacher Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing award. And what I mean by that is not that he didn't have a great season, because he did. His 15 wins are a Formula One record, and even with stat inflation, that is an impressive number. But there is this undercurrent of his results make his season and his car look better than they actually were, because Ferrari defeats themselves, so often he just had to, I think this is the third football analogy of the day, but screw it, just tap the ball into the empty net. So again, he had an absolute fine season, absolute great. He deserves to be world champion, and there's nothing I want to imply that he doesn't, or that he didn't have a great season, but in many ways, the opposition made it far easier for him than they should have.
Yep. Leclerc looked after 3 races that he was going for it. He was going to win that championship. He didn't. He only won 1 more race for the rest of the next 19 races, which is grim. Perez, it's Verstappen's teammate, and he's not there to beat Verstappen. He got 2 wins this year, which I think was good. He could have won 3 or 4 had, for example, the situation in Silverstone been different. I'm sure there was one other race or 2 which could have been different as well, but the Mercedes weren't necessarily there. They were sometimes second best, sometimes third best, but they had their porpoising issues for most of the early half of the season. And actually, surprisingly enough, that time when they had their problems was actually the time when Red Bull were more competitive. How should I say? Not that Ferrari, for example, were more competitive, and it's been a strange one. It feels like in the second half of the season, when Ferrari were messing up a lot less with their pit stops, with their strategies, and seemed to be a little bit more competent, I should say, and Mercedes had solved their porpoising issue, somehow it seemed that Verstappen and Red Bull got faster. Perhaps it was a mid-season, development race thing, which Red Bull were just winning hands down, but
that's at least no problem. That's at least the official story Ferrari told recently, that Red Bull managing to sort out their weight issue helped more than Ferrari's aerodynamic upgrades did.
Verstappen had the season of his career. He won't have another. I don't think he will have another season like this. But it's been funny because both of his championships now have been kind of tainted for some reason or another, or at least I think there's a lot of bad press against Max Verstappen. A lot of it is his own doing, because he is the son of Jos, and that kind of reputation kind of follows him around. He's a bit of a bad boy, to sort of treat it as a joke. He's a bit of a bad boy, but he is part of a team which is, they don't play nice, and Red Bull are famously not nice when it comes to the press, the media. I mean, they used to be, ironically enough, they used to be the fun team, as they called themselves, but how times have changed since 2006.
Fun don't win championships.
yeah, fun doesn't win championships, and Verstappen has won 2 now, and he destroyed most of the field in many races this year. As you say, it was made easy for him from time to time, namely at the French Grand Prix. But yeah, no taking it away. I would say 9.5 out of 10 season, but I think that's only because of, how should I say, recency bias. I think the Sao Paulo race, for example, is only because it's fresh in our memories that we're taking away from what is probably a 10 out of 10 season. I don't think we could have expected Verstappen to have done better this year than he did. Had he finished in Bahrain, he would have been at least second, perhaps first. Had he finished in Australia, he would have been third. And those were his only 2 retirements due to mechanical issues. So, yeah, damn. 10 out of 10 season, basically, minus the bad press and the seeming willingness to just taint all of his finest moments with bad media. But I guess that's just part and parcel of winning with Red Bull. It's the monkey's paw, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a very good description Ralf Schumacher had after the Brazilian Grand Prix, where he talked about Verstappen having a Street Fighter attitude, and with because of growing up with Joss. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of it. This fuck you got mine attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, it has obviously helped him succeed and helped many other people across the history of sports succeed. But again, there are good people who can win championships. So it's always a question of, do you really need this? So, but again, that's a sports philosophical debate. That is something I think everyone is up to a certain point going to have an opinion on. It obviously also depends on whether you see good guys winning championships, whether you see bad guys winning championships, what's your attitude on that. Like, for example, I'm also an NBA fan besides a motorsport fan, and I saw a genuine nice guy in Stephen Curry win 4 championships. So obviously I am much more inclined to think you don't need to be this ruthless, brutal, hardcore leader. But obviously someone who hasn't seen that, or has seen well, for lack of a better word, douchebags win elsewhere, is going to have a very different point of view. So that is a philosophical, open-ended debate, because again, sports history has good examples of both. So yeah.
Yeah. And for all my complaints about sportsmanship in drivers, and then not saying anything about that with Verstappen is maybe hypocritical. But then again, neither you nor I have ever been at the top of competitive sports. I mean, someone like you don't get to be even in the Red Bull Academy unless you're ruthless. Never mind to the top of the Red Bull Academy. Max Verstappen is the top 1% of the 1% of the 1%. You know,
indeed.
And he like Vettel is the product of that very, very, very selective program, and that's the kind of person that you get out of it. And Verstappen is doing very, very well. I hope that things calm down internally, I guess, in Red Bull, and that they can just sort of savor their victory rather than constantly being at war with the press. But then again, that's what the press are for. They're there to get money and print out stupid headlines of Christian Horner saying this and Christian Horner saying that, and people reacting to it and going, oh my goodness, can you believe that such and such said this? And we live in a world of social media and all this nonsense, and all this is just content and distraction, because you look at the final results and it's 15 wins out of 22 races and total domination. And in the future, we will probably completely have forgotten any of the media nonsense that was going on, because none of it really, I mean, you're about to correct me in about 10 seconds, but I don't think any really of the media has actually been of any actual interest that's going to last beyond the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I actually fully agree with that. And of course, given, as you mentioned him, Sebastian Vettel grew out of it, so there's always a chance Max will just simply mature a bit more, because again, he's like, what is he, 24?
25 now.
25, and let's just say if I look back at myself at 25 and myself now, which are 6 years difference, almost 7, we are talking 2 different people here. So obviously there's always the chance that he will just, I don't want to say grow up, but change in some way. So one way or another we'll see what he will become. And again, this season is great. His achievement stands beyond a shadow of a doubt, which, short editorial note, I would like to rename the award a bit, because it again sounds too unfair in hindsight. So let's call it the 2001 Michael Schumacher I'm great, but they also keep beating themselves award.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
So yeah, just edit that a bit. Good. Now we have talked about all 22 drivers who have appeared in the World Championship races this season. So let's get to the actual juicy bit. The famous Reject of the Year podium.
Okay. So my third is Lance Stroll. I mentioned this already. I think I put him third place for the reason that he has been here for so many seasons, and he's no longer even giving the one season performances. He's had very many embarrassing crashes, which junior drivers would be slammed for. The kind of accidents of people not looking in their mirrors that would get junior drivers banned for races from. When he's getting the occasional pole or podium, that's one thing. But when he's not getting any results and he's actually a danger on track, that's when we're getting to reject of the year territory. I don't think he's been bad enough to get reject of the year, so that's why I put him third.
Mm-hmm. Well, my third place, and this is going to be I'm going to take a bit away, the entire theme of my podium with I am done with your nonsense. And that is why third place goes to Ferrari. Because it is the same. Nothing has changed. I remember Ferrari management talking when they let Vettel go to bring in Sainz. They talked about long-term rebuilding, about restructuring, to be better operational, to be better at developing, to have these young drivers that grow with them. But where is the growth? This team is the exact same it had been in 2017, it's the exact same it had been in 2018. It is the same non-championship winning operation it has always been. And yeah, maybe they're going to fire Binotto. And if they do, it's not unjustified, but I also don't have any faith in them picking someone who can actually fix it. And this is the entire topic. As I said, I don't think the Red Bull has been as dominant to the point that they should have romped away with both championships. Would I say they were good enough? Like, they would have probably, if it had gone to the last race, Verstappen would have, like, I don't know, 24, 25, 22 points for advantage that he pretty much just need to finish to get the title. But the reality is we didn't even get close to that point. And that is because operational management, poor strategy, drivers making mistakes, both Leclerc and Sainz, and just it's never going to change, is it? And it is probably too harsh, and I think many will disagree with me on placing the third here, but I just can't with them anymore. And again, that's going to be more or less the topic of the podium. But we get
so. I originally had a group of 3 drivers in second, which is just too many drivers. So my honorable mentions, which are just missed my podium, are Yuki Tsunoda and Nicholas Latifi. Both had very poor seasons. Tsunoda has not improved on his previous season other than the fact that he's calmed down a bit, but he's now gone from being a bit crash prone and very angry to being anonymous. Nicholas Latifi has gone from being the second slowest driver on the grid to the slowest driver on the grid. And unfortunately, I didn't think that they were bad enough to be rejects of the year. Just there. So in second place, I have Mick Schumacher. Now, this might be a controversial choice because some might say that Yuki Tsunoda or Nicholas Latifi had a worse season than him, but I tend to treat Schumacher worse because of the expectations I had of him. The Haas was improved, and we knew going into this that Schumacher had a chance to unrejectify himself and prove himself as a driver. Magnussen had not had any experience in the car, jumped in, destroyed him. Schumacher wasn't there when the car was good, and his one moment in Austria, his 6th place, was his only one with the racing gods. And he didn't unrejectify himself, and he scored no points after the Austrian Grand Prix. He was many races just kind of not, I was going to say there, but that's a bit complimentary. He checked out for many, many races. He was still quite crash prone, especially in qualifying. And he has just simply not done enough to retain his seat, and it's been very disappointing to see just how badly he did this year.
Yeah, I fully agree. He had, I would have had him in my honorable mentions had we done those, and if we weren't lacking for time. I didn't give him on the podium spot because he was comparatively competitive on Sunday with Kevin Magnussen, even if Magnussen got all the juicy results out of it. So I didn't have him in my top 3, but as you said, I fully agree. He didn't deliver on his promise. He didn't really show any advancement compared to last year. And yeah, hope you like that Mercedes reserve driver gig, because that's all you're getting in Formula One.
The fact that Schumacher did so poorly against Magnussen, in spite of the fact that Magnussen had simply jumped in the car, had been out of Formula One for a year, and Mick knew the car, knew the team, knew everything, and was also probably faster than him on many weekends, and still did so badly. He had every possible opportunity he could have been given to do well, and he threw every single one of those opportunities, bar one, away.
Yeah, I fully agree. And again, I didn't have him on my podium and only had him as an honorable mention because he was relatively competitive against Magnussen on Sunday, even if Magnussen got all the sexy points out of it. But as you say, Magnussen was out of the team for a year, was doing sports cars. So yeah, I fully understand anyone who places him on their podium. And again, he's an honorable mention, probably even 4th place for me. So fully agreed. My second place is Daniel Ricciardo. Now, some people are going to question this choice because I said earlier when we discussed him in our award session that his distance to Lando Norris wasn't solely down to his inability, but simply because Lando Norris was just that damn good. But the thing is, even if he had a teammate that was that damn good, that was my personal driver of the year, it still doesn't justify his poor performance. The thing is, as I said before, 85 points difference are not just a difference in driver, not just a difference in Ricciardo and what for lack of a better word, average driver would have had in that McLaren. I think that difference is somewhere in the region of 30, 40 points. But even then, we're talking about a difference of 30 or 40 points for a driver who last season won a race. Let's not forget that. Was a race winner last season, even if that race win was pretty much the only real highlight of his year. But the thing is, Ricciardo just has run out of excuses, so to speak. While the McLaren isn't the kind of car that suits his driving style well, something that he had much more at Renault, where he had obviously much more at Red Bull, even with all that, it just does not justify being that uncompetitive, that just struggling that much, even as McLaren themselves got their stuff sorted out. You have to remember they were pretty much among the weakest teams in the first quarter of the season, but still, there's just no justification for being that far out of it. And by the end of the season, you could see that Ricciardo had also lost any faith in himself he had. Like, he's talking about, like, he obviously is saying the right things about it. I want to stay in Formula One, but subconsciously he knows, okay, I am on the fringe. That accident with Magnussen at Interlagos, that is not something that happens to someone who genuinely thinks they still have a realistic chance of being in F1. That is something to happen that someone who is desperate, who is clinging to every lifeline they have. And that's just the entire theme of the season. He was just poor. Like, there are sometimes periods where good drivers go through a downturn and just lose confidence. In a way, that's what I said earlier about what happened with Gasly, that he just can't quite access the skills he has. But one example of that would also be Rubens Barrichello in the 2007 season, just to pick a historical one. But Ricciardo is even below that standard. And that is why I have him second on my Reject of the Year podium, because many people probably expected Norris to again win the team battle. Some even expected him to win it in a convincing fashion. But none expected him to absolutely destroy Ricciardo on almost every level, and for Ricciardo himself to not even be at the level someone of his talent should be, someone of the number 2 driver for a midfield team should be. And falling away from those standards is what gets him in my second place.
Yeah, and this is from someone who was finishing ahead of this is someone who finished ahead of Alexander Albon in 2020, who was driving a Red Bull. Like, the fall from grace from Daniel Ricciardo has been shocking. Not so shocking now that we're 2 years into it, but at least a little bit less forgivable as time has gone on. And we're now at a point whereby he's had 2 seasons at McLaren after what was a very, very good 2020, and his win was really the thing which kept him from being on the podium last year, because he had that one glorious highlight and he showed that bit of potential that he might just make it. So he might just turn things around. And he had periods of 3 or 4 races in a row where he wasn't even scoring points this year. And yep, as you say, his morale has also been part of that vote for me. And I can just say now that I put him as my reject of the year. He was my number 1 rejects of the year this year, for that reason, that he's lost the motivation as well as the results getting worse. It's like he hasn't shown himself worthy of being in Formula 1. He hasn't even shown himself as being anywhere near his teammate, no matter how good his teammate is. And he has not even shown himself good enough to convince another team to hire him for more than a 3rd driver. Someone quite poetically pointed out that he left Red Bull in 2018 so that he wouldn't be Max Verstappen's 2nd driver, and now returns 4 years later as his 3rd driver. So that would be my sign-off for my reject of the year, which would be Daniel Ricciardo. But I want to hear who your reject of the year is, because I have no idea who it's going to be.
Yeah, and in many ways this is going to be a reject of the year that breaks with a lot of, well, not either tradition or standard, whatever you want to call it. Because usually at GP Rejects we have 2 mental approaches for reject of, be it race, be it year, be it whatever. Reject of the decade. That's a podcast idea. And it's not actually one that falls in either category. Because if you had told them before the season that they would have gotten this performance out of them, then everyone would have said, yeah, sounds good, sounds realistic, especially after the season they had previously. And were they offensively bad? No, they weren't either. At least not to the general public. To me, yes, but we'll get to that. And my reject of the year for 2022 is Haas Ferrari. Now,
interesting.
The reason for this is very simple. Media, not in this season, but in the years prior. Pretty much from, let's say, 2018 onwards. They talked about how, honestly not even 2018, they even did it in 2017 and to a lesser extent 2016. They talked about Formula 1 being this 2-tier system, which it is, but let me explain. They thought about how budgets are unfair, how aerodynamics are giving bigger teams advantages, how everything is going to the top teams, and how his small independent team just can't stay competitive. And what do we have this year? Introduced in recent years and coming into effect this year. We have a budget cap. We have aerodynamic restrictions on the top teams, the whole inverted championship standings in term relating to aero time. We have a new aerodynamic formula where everything is new. Pretty much the entire game was in a way flipped on its head. Ground effects were reintroduced, everything. And what are we looking at with Haas? Same old shit. And sorry for the vulgarity, but it's pretty much just what it is. They started the same way. They start almost every season except the last one, where they are competitive, good even upper midfield team, and then they fizzle away because they can't develop for jack. They don't get better. They slowly drop off the face of the earth and are backmarkers by the end of the year. Except that one time in Interlagos. And it is always the same with him. And it's going to be the same next year. And the year after that. Until eventually Gene Haas gets it through his head that whatever management structure he has at his team is not getting him what he wants. Unless he wants to be perpetually mediocre, perpetually doing the same stuff year in, year out. Having the same uninspired driver lineup. Having just a perpetual cycle of mediocrity. Not entertainingly enough to be a reject, not showing any ambition to go beyond glorified Ferrari B team. It is just... I know this is a bit odd for someone on GP rejects, but I have such a disdain for people in pro sports, at the highest tier of pro sports, who lack ambition, who are okay with being mediocre. And Haas are just that personified, and that is why I'm giving them my reject of the year, because nothing has changed, nothing will change, and it will continue like this forever.
If I may close this podcast on that note, I think it's been a very interesting season for how predictable it has been. Ferrari have shown promise and completely collapsed under strategy, and the whole team went from a 1-2 in the first race of the year to everyone in tears by race 5 or 6. Alpine are content to finish in 4th in the championship, and that's the best they'll ever end up in. And they're content to have 2 slightly interesting drivers who will do okay. McLaren, again, fast but not fast enough. Ambitious but just not with the results. Alfa Romeo, up and down, but again, too many mistakes. Too many of their, how should I say, Ferrari-esque strategy errors and pit blunders and everything. Haas, not developing enough, still slow. They start off well and then they tail off. AlphaTauri, not really doing anything other than being a placeholder for Red Bull Juniors, and Williams, victims of venture capitalists who are just sucking the team dry until about 2024 or so, when they pull out and the team disappears forever. And isn't this just what we saw last year?
More or less it is.
I think the only team that has been different this year has been Mercedes. But then again, they haven't been different, because what have they been? They've been invincible, perfect pit stops, no problems whatsoever. They've been basically indestructible, and it nearly took them second in the championship. It's been interesting how, in spite of, no matter how much things change, they always stay the same, don't they, Lennart?
In a way, they do. And what change does inevitably occur, it crawls up slowly, quietly, and ruthlessly. Very slowly.
What a wonderful note to end 2022 on. Any closing remarks on the season? I think our listeners have probably had enough content for one evening, unless there is one specific topic you want to bring up. Was there anything you wanted to chat about before we close this down offhandedly here?
Well, despite our complaints, it hasn't been a terrible season by any means. It has been too long, but honestly, that's just the nature of the beast Liberty Media has chosen. And so we're just going to have to live with that, or as I will do, just orientate myself towards other motorsports, so that actually has nothing to do with what Liberty Media are doing wrong, so cut that sentence. Yeah, it has been a season of ups and downs, of interest and non-interest. It's been very long. It's only going to get longer in the future. But in the end, it is still Formula One, with all the bad and a lot of the good it entails. We aren't fans of the sport just so we can complain about it, are we? No, we aren't. So, yeah. So yeah, it's going to be in a way interesting to see what the future holds for racing, for Formula One in particular. And there's one thing in particular the Brazilian Grand Prix has taught us that is obviously very important to remember. Thank you, Lance and Sebastian and Fernando and Esteban, for reminding us of that lesson, and that is where teammates are close, teammates collide.
Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Lennart. Do you have any plans for the off season?
Well, there's still the season finale of Stock Car Brazil coming up on the 10th of December, so obviously I'm very much looking forward to that. Or was it the 11th of December? It's the 11th of December. And obviously after that I plan on spending the holidays with my family, which I hope everyone who wants to do so has the ability to do, especially now that thankfully it seems like the corona pandemic is slowly getting left behind. And so So yeah, the entire GP Rejects team really wants to wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a healthy 2023, and I think I speak for Jeremy and myself, obviously, in that we want to thank you for listening to Teammate Collision.
Yep.
And of course, thank you for and thank you for reading gpreject.com. Whether how this podcast will return next year, we will.
Next year we will. This probably won't be the last Teammate Collision podcast, but we've been doing this on a sort of a more emphasis on the semi regular basis in 2022, and this will probably continue for the podcasts to come. Just every now and then, chewing the fat, as they say, where I come from, regarding what's going on these days, and some reject retrospectives. I'm looking forward to this Christmas going through a couple of more profiles. I just recently had my latest article published, which was David Hobbs, a British driver who is a well-known driver to many in the American audience, and one of the most positive reject profiles I've ever written. Someone who didn't have really very many bad days. And before Christmas, we should have, hopefully, Roger Loyer, a French driver from the 50s, a profile published, and I will keep the following ones a secret. We have next profile will be a driver from the 2010s, and hopefully that will be also out for a nice Christmas present this year. And I also plan to carry on from there for the foreseeable future, but Christmas time should give me lots more time to write, and I look forward to sitting down to tell tales of rejects lore from the good old days.
Yeah, and the Grabber Trap will take a month off in December, so I can recharge my batteries. And also, I don't want to promise too much, but I am also working on a profile that will obviously remain top secret until it's done. Plus, of course, after that, the Grabber Trap will return in 2023 with a lot of hopefully interesting stories from both the world of rejects and the world of non-rejects. So I hope you're looking forward to that. And obviously, if we are talking about your profiles, Jeremy, I obviously want to take the opportunity to personally and on behalf of everyone on GP Rejects, thank you very much for your hard work for the site. We very much appreciate your effort, and trust us, without you, we wouldn't be anywhere in as good a position as we are, and we would certainly have a lot less enjoyable content. So allow me to express my gratitude.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm glad, likewise, I appreciate Grabber Traps. I always give them a proofread before they're published, so I have actually read every single one you've ever written. So I could say that I've gone through them with a fine-tooth comb, and I always get a joy out of reading them. So
I'm happy to hear that.
Expect more content in the off-season. I'm also planning on writing a book review of The Unknown Kimi Räikkönen, which I live in Finland these days, and my Finnish is getting a little bit better, so I've been actually reading it in Finnish. So my book review will be in English, thankfully enough, for our international audience. But it's been my latest challenge of integrating in Finland. It's been to read the Kimi Räikkönen biography. So expect that to be an interesting off-season book review. And my next possible Christmas plan is to watch the amazing race, which there's a special season of famous sports people and celebrities, which actually included Indy 500 winner and F1 reject Alexander Rossi in it. So I'm tempted to do an episode by episode analysis of his take at the amazing race, but we'll see.
Yeah.
More content incoming for Christmas. Farewell to Sebastian Vettel. Farewell to everyone. Have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And enjoy the rest of your year, and see you in 2023.